everybody. Welcome to the Underwater Photography Show. I know it's been a bit, but we have a very special one for you guys today. As always, I am Matthew Sullivan.
And I'm Alex Mustard.
And today we have Brian Skerry on the show. Almost everybody watching this probably knows who he is already. But if not, Brian is a National Geographic photographer. They gave me a bio to read. It's very long because he's done everything and won everything. So I'm just going to give you the spark notes. He's a National Geographic photographer for over 30 years. He now is a producer for Disney and National Geographic. He's done Secrets of the Whales, which is on Disney. He's done a shark program on Disney. He's won in Wildlife Photographer of the Year. He's won every other photography accolade out there. He is a founding member of the International League of Conservation Photographers. And today we're having him on because he has a brand new show premiering in about a week and a half.
And this is our 50th episode as well, so we had to mark something special.
Yes. So he's coming on to discuss sea change, as the title alludes to. It is about climate change and its effects on a very special place in the world, the Gulf of Maine, which are his home waters.
Which, for the Europeans watching, I was just going to say, is kind of the northeast of the United States. So it's kind of, and it's that boundary between the United States and Canada. And I think the United States goes up a bit on that side as well. So it's kind of the northern part of the main part of the United States, not counting Alaska.
So we're going to talk to Brian about that. He'll talk through the show and all the environmental hazards that the Gulf of Maine is facing, and perhaps some of the changes that can be made to bring it back or revive it a little bit. So without further ado, you're tired of hearing me ramble. Let's bring Brian to the show.
I'm doing great, Matt. Great to be here.
Cool.
Oh, it's very nice to have you.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is awesome for us to have you here. We've had some guests before, so hopefully this one goes pretty well. I'm sure it will, because I'm sure you're going to tell us some fantastic stories. But the reason we have you on today is because you have a new show premiering on, I think it's PBS, coming out in a week and a half, I guess. So if you'd like to tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks very much, Matt and Alex. And so this new project is called Sea Change. It's a 3-part television series, a documentary series that I created and produced for PBS, for WGBH in Boston, Cambridge, Boston. And it's really designed to look at this body of water known as the Gulf of Maine in the United States. Now, even though it has the word Maine in its name, it is not just in the state of Maine. The Gulf of Maine actually extends from Cape Cod, Massachusetts in the south, up through the Canadian Maritimes, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick. And this is a body of water that is rather unique in the world, in the sense that it was created after the last ice age, after the Laurentian ice sheets retreated and left this really unique geology. It has various sediment bottoms. So there's gravel bottom, there's sand, there's mud, there's a western edge that is rocky in some places and shoaly and sandy in others, like in the south near Cape Cod. The eastern edge is the continental shelf, and it has this amazing confluence of currents. So you've got the Gulf Stream rising up from the south. You've got the Labrador current, cold current coming down from the north. You've got upwellings with nutrient-rich water coming from the continental shelf. And then you've got this counterclockwise coastal Maine current. So I often describe it as if you were making a perfect recipe, a perfect cake, let's say, and you add all the ingredients in there, and then you mix it perfectly. And because this region is in a temperate zone, it also has seasonal stratification from the 4 seasons. So what it has led to over the centuries is this proliferation of life. You know, the Gulf of Maine, in no small way, fostered the colonization of America, with the Portuguese, the Basques, the British coming over here in the 14th, 15th century mostly for codfish, a species that was thought to be inexhaustible, but yet today we have fished out 99% of them. We're at 1% of colonial levels. But now the Gulf of Maine is facing its greatest threat. It has been identified to be one of the epicenters of global ocean climate change. A paper came out a few years ago that said it is warming faster than 97% of the rest of the global ocean. So I wanted to bring some visual context to what that means. I still think a lot of folks don't really grasp what climate change means. And here's a place that is known to many, certainly in North America and maybe worldwide, it is a regional story with global implications. And the project was really designed to look at both the natural history and the coastal communities, indigenous communities, and their perspective on this region, how they worked in harmony with it thousands of years ago. And then, we came in and see it as a commodity, and what that all means for today, and really looking for solutions as well, how we might mitigate the damage both to the ecosystem and to the economy.
What a fantastic introduction. And even though I'm on the other side of the pond, it's a body of water that we definitely, as a British-based diver, feel an affinity for, because there's so much that's familiar there too for us. It's kind of like British waters, but turned up to 11 with the huge tides that pump so much energy through the system as well there. So yeah. Sorry, Matt, I was just there.
I was just going to comment on, because Brian was talking about how we've had such an impact on there, but there's people who are doing things to try to restore those ecosystems, and I think he did a really good job I watched the first 2 episodes. I think that's all we were sent, but how you go through all of the problems that this area is facing, and then all the people who are doing whatever they can to kind of restore it, like the guy who's building the clam huts in the mud flats, and then of course going out to Cash's Ledge, which looks spectacular, and it's nice to see that there's still healthy places in that region, despite all of the harm that largely humans have done to the place.
Yeah, no, that's a really good synopsis, Matt. I began diving many years ago, 47 years ago. I started diving in 1977, got certified in 1978. And I began diving in these waters then. I grew up in a little town in Massachusetts. It wasn't a coastal town, but I fell in love with the sea as a child. My parents would take me to the beaches of Massachusetts and Rhode Island and New Hampshire, and I deeply wanted to be an ocean explorer. I started scuba diving when I was about 15 years old, and then 2 or 3 years later, I attended a dive show, the Boston Sea Rovers show in Boston, and I remember sitting in that audience as a teenager and having an epiphany, where I saw these underwater photographers and filmmakers present their work, and decided that's what I wanted to do. It was a very lofty dream. I came from a little textile mill town, didn't have the resources and didn't know anybody, but it all ended up coming true for me. But those were my native waters that I started diving in, and over the last 30 years or so, I've been working mostly as a National Geographic magazine photographer, and now doing more films and so forth. And that my work has taken me everywhere else in the world, but I've always wanted to do a story on my native waters, because I have an affinity for it. However, it was when this paper came out that said, it's warming faster than the rest of the planet, that I thought there was a real sense of urgency, and that we could tell an important story. What I didn't expect was how everything had changed. When I came back to these places, or as I was creating my script for the film, or I did a cover story for National Geographic magazine. It was in the June issue 2024 last month, on the same subject. I said, well, I'm going to go to these places that I knew used to be really good. For example, there's a little town in northeastern Maine called Eastport, Maine. It is where the sun rises first on the American continent, and the North American continent. And it's a place where, as Alex said, we have these 30-foot tides, almost 10-meter tides, that bring in all these nutrients. And I used to dive there regularly back in the day, and I would go in on night dives just off the beach. And it was like going into an aquarium, or I often describe it as a jewelry store, where there was just this proliferation of invertebrate life, basket stars and anemones, telea anemones, and metridium anemones, and redfish, and soft corals, even, tiny soft corals, and all these wonderful things. I went back there on 2 trips for this project, and it was like a ghost town. It was just mud and almost nothing left, very few invertebrates. All the animals that we used to commonly see and we took for granted back then are just gone. And I think largely that's because of climate change. So it was really disappointing and dispiriting, but that unfortunately is part of the story.
I'd like to jump in with a personal question, Shine. I think a lot of our viewers will be interested in. And obviously to the underwater photography world, you're known as as one of the greats of underwater photography. How personally has that transition been? Not that it's a permanent transition, but into telling stories through another medium and in a very different way to the way you do with a camera. How's that been, Brian?
Well, it's a really great question, Alex, and I'm glad you asked it. And before I say that, let me just say that we're certainly in the Mutual Admiration Club. You're one of my all-time favorite underwater photographers, and I look to you for inspiration all the time. I mean, just brilliant work. So with that in mind, I would answer the question by saying that I love still photography perhaps more than anything. I can look at a great photograph all day long and for decades and never get tired of it. And I think there's something uniquely special about a still frame. That being said, as a storyteller, I realize that we can reach different audiences and that some subjects and stories are equally well told through motion. Um, to answer your question about what it's like to not have the camera in my hand and just create these ideas and then produce and direct them, it's been a little difficult. I'm always sort of chafing at the bit to get in the water and show the cameraman what I think we should be doing. And sometimes I do. I mean, with this project, for example, we hired some terrific underwater DPs. But I would get in the water and look at the scene and, to the best of my ability, try to give them direction or swim over a scene, pretending to hold the camera and say, do this angle and then do it again and so forth. And we have a good rapport. So it's challenging, but quite frankly, I've been doing this for almost 50 years. There's a little bit of joy when I wake up in the morning and I don't have to load 30 cases of my own equipment into the back of the truck and or on the boat, and I can just sit in the chair and have a coffee and say, yeah, don't forget to bring that tripod, so there is that. But I think it's a nice blend. I'm certainly not giving up photography by any means. I am still working on other projects right now and hope to do both. But it's a nice transition, and it's a new canvas for me to sort of work on.
Oh, sorry, Alex, go ahead. I was just going to start.
I'm keen, before we have to wrap up, to ask Brian some underwater photography questions, but I also wanted to hear a little bit more about some of the, because a documentary is made up of multiple strands of stories, some of the stories within the Gulf of Maine that that were perhaps surprising for you, or really encapsulated the whole challenge of climate change hitting the marine environment.
Yeah, excellent point. One of the things I really realized with even previous stories I've done for the Geographic is that it's very hard to communicate loss. When things aren't there, there's not much to photograph or film. And in the case that I described as going back to Eastport, the best way to show that would be to show pictures from years ago or video, which I had some, but we didn't have any video. And it's very difficult to just show a muddy bottom and say, well, imagine what this looked like 10 years ago. So what we tried to do was, in terms of bringing visual context to the climate change issue, I looked for those circumstances where things were changing. So for example, 4 years ago, when I started working on my magazine story up here, I discovered lobsters out in the sand. So the North American lobster, the one with the big claws, it is actually the richest fishery in America. It's about $600 million annually. There's been a real boom. Scientists say that because of warming sea temperatures, the reproduction has reached a sweet spot where they're reproducing more than they used to. And there's no predators. The codfish are gone that would eat the juvenile lobsters. So lobster numbers have exploded. However, just last year, those numbers started to tick down. I think the trajectory, and for a variety of reasons, lobsters may not be doing very well in the future. We'll see. But one of the things I discovered out there was that there was a lot of lobsters out in the sand. Now, I'd never seen that before. In previous years, I always saw them tucked away in these little dens and rocky crevices. And I talked to a lobster scientist at one of the local universities, and he said, oh yeah, no, we know what that is. It's because there's such an abundance that the more mature, older lobsters are taking the good habitat, and the younger, maybe injured lobsters or whatever are out there digging their own low rent condominiums. They're digging craters in the sand. So we filmed that behavior, and most of the people I know had never seen that before. So that was a visual that showed some new behavior. It showed the cleverness of these animals, and it also spoke directly to warming temperatures with the seawater here. Another visual was actually with seabirds. So this wasn't an underwater scene, but both animals like puffins and terns typically fledge or they have their chicks in the summer, springtime here in these waters, and they feed their chicks slender-bodied silver fish like whiting or sand lance or herring, because the little chicks can easily swallow that. Well, as waters have warmed, the native species that they normally forage for are gone. They're not around, but there are these, I don't want to call them invasive species, but they're animals like butterfish that used to be found further south on the Atlantic coast, and now we're moving more into the Gulf of Maine. They are wide-bodied silverfish. So we have great footage of, these parents bringing back one of these butterfish, trying to feed it to its chick, but it can't swallow it because it's too big. So the animal, the chick is either choking on it or holding it in its mouth for a few moments and then spitting it out. But the data, the scientific data, shows that the mortality rate is increasing on those years when the water is warm and those natural fish aren't available. So I think those are the kinds of things I was seeking to do, to show audiences immediately what climate change means in this place and why it matters.
Sorry, Matt.
So one thing that I was curious about, because I've heard about the green crab problem, but I never knew it was to that extent. Where did they come from? So I think it's a European species. Is there any theories to how they got here? Did we bring them over here and introduce them, or did they drift over in currents, or what happened?
Yeah, no, I think they arrived here probably in the 1800s, Matt, in the bilge water of ships, and they had relatively been kept in check because of the very cold winters in these waters. However, as climate change is increasing and the waters are warming up, their numbers have now exploded. And as you'll see in the film, or you did see in the film, they're doing great damage in coastal ecosystems in the intertidal zone. They're burrowing in and then destroying the sea grasses and roots. They also predate on sea clams, which in this area is probably the second biggest fishery. And there had been no way to really control them. And now there's this one neighbor of mine, actually, who was a marine biology teacher in a local high school, quit his job, partnered with a young 28-year-old lobsterman to start a business where they're trying to figure out when they molt, because in Venice, Italy, a similar green crab, they figured out a very lucrative market for restaurants serving soft shell green crabs. And now they've figured out when they molt. Again, it's just in the early stages, but they're hoping that they can eat their way through that problem a little bit.
Yeah, because I'm actually in Massachusetts right now, but we were in New Jersey a couple weeks ago, and we did a dive in Shark River Inlet, which is known as a good macro critter spot.
Yeah,
almost everything we saw was a green crab. There were still some spider crabs around, some pipefish and things like that, but 99% of what we saw was green crabs.
Yeah, it's like a horror film. I mean, they're just crawling over the bottom. I remember in some of my dives, I was echoing Indiana Jones. I'd be down there like, crabs. Why did it have to be crabs? But they're everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, it's sad. But I'm sorry, Alex. I know I interrupted you.
No. I was just. I think there's a lot of. I mean, as to bring it back a little bit more towards still photography, I think there's a lot of still photographers out there who would love to be able to tell more of the conservation stories of the ocean, but find particularly climate change such a difficult one to tell through still images in particular. And I think that the examples that you've given where, you've got that little bit more research and understanding of the bigger picture actually means that, the superabundance of lobsters or the invasion of green crabs or the butterfish with the seabirds and things all of those that extra level of research is really unlocking the photographic potential. And I wondered if you had any other advice towards conservation-minded underwater photographers on ways to find stories and particularly find the images within those stories.
Well, yeah, I think I do, and you sort of encapsulated that really well, Alex. And I think I would start by saying that I think we're living at this pivotal moment in history, where maybe for the very first time humans understand both the problems and the solutions, and we just need a collective will to move toward those solutions. And there's a lot of other problems in the world, and there's a lot of noise and disinformation and misinformation and all this stuff. But I think photographers are uniquely positioned to be able to do three things, or what I call sort of this triumvirate of credibility. I think as divers, we can be ambassadors to the ocean world. We can give those firsthand examples of what we are seeing. What Matt just described in the Shark River in New Jersey. He's seeing all these crabs, right? Most people don't know about that. So I think humans relate to other humans. And if you sit down over a cup of coffee and tell me that you're seeing this trend, I will tend to believe you. If you add photographs of that thing, I will believe you even more. And if you back it up with scientific data, true, white paper evidence, then now you've got this really almost irrefutable body of evidence that goes a long way. And people these days might not believe this source or that source or whatever, but I think if we can communicate without being preachy and just say, this is what we're seeing, this is the data, these are my images or video, then it goes a long way. And for the photographer, I often describe what I've done for a lot of my life is parachuting into the lives of researchers and trying to tell their story visually. These people dedicate their lives to understanding sometimes singular things, and they don't necessarily always have the ability to communicate that visually. But if we can go in for a couple of months or whatever and tell that story well, then it can be very powerful. And getting paid for it, of course, is another part of the equation. But hopefully, if you do things that you are passionate about, that you love, that you believe are valuable, others will find value in that too. And maybe it's, a university has some budget for communications, or a nonprofit, an NGO, or somebody. There's a number of ways to skin that cat, I think. And even like an aquarium. If there's an aquarium near where they live, or a zoo or something, maybe they have a certain animal on display, or they're doing some conservation project, and you can be an entrepreneur. You can go into them and say, well, you've got this display, and I know about a threat somewhere else in this region, and I can go photograph that. And maybe if you fund me to do it, I'll create a set of pictures for you that you can use in a new exhibit. You might own the photos, but give them a 5-year license or something. You can be strategic about it, and everybody wins in a situation like that. So, but I do think we're at this moment where we all have to kind of do everything we can.
One thing you just said that I think is really important is you said it's to avoid being preachy, because I think human instinct, if somebody's like preaching at you, is to kind of pull back a little bit from it or push back against it. And one thing I think you've done really well, especially in the show, is you've just kind of laid everything out, and you're leaving it open to everybody else to take it upon themselves what they're going to do about it or how they would like to react to it, instead of being like, this is what you need to do.
I think, yeah, you nailed it, Matt. I mean, people don't want to be preached at. They don't want to be told what to eat or what not to eat, or what to drive or what not to drive. But with some exception, I think most people are reasonable. And if they want clean air to breathe, and they understand that every other breath they take comes from the ocean, then maybe they begin to have some appreciation for the ocean. The very first sort of environmental story I did, I think, was a cover story back in 2004 for National Geographic about harp seals, the little white seals up in the Canadian Maritimes in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. And I went into that wanting to do a pure natural history story, but as I got involved, I realized there were two big issues. that were facing these animals. One was that the hunting continued. They still clubbed them with hackapicks and, sold the fur for mittens and hats and coats. And the other thing was that there was a decline of sea ice occurring because of climate change. So I focused on both of those things. I ultimately became the first journalist in 17 years to get on board one of those hunting boats. And it was because I was able to develop a level of trust, I think, with those hunters. They had nothing to gain by letting me on that boat, but they did. And we presented it in the magazine without being preachy. We didn't demonize anybody. We just said, this is what's happening. And, draw your own conclusions. And hopefully people draw a, informed decision about what they want to do about that issue.
It's very, very, very valuable advice. I mean, especially with the lifetime experience that you've had working around these issues and finding the right ways to present them. I do think it's an area that a lot of underwater photographers are really passionate about, wanting to create images that have a real value to them beyond the aesthetics. And I think a lot of people struggle to know where to start. So it's very valuable advice, all of this.
And I would add too, Alex, though, and this probably better than anybody, is that most of us who get into this business or as a pursuit, we didn't go in wanting to make pictures of terrible ecosystems and dead animals or sharks and nets or finning and things like that. But I think we do it because we feel a responsibility and an urgency. But the other side of the coin, of course, is that ultimately people protect what they love, and that we need to never lose sight of that beauty component and the celebratory aspect of the ocean. I mean, we live on an ocean planet. 98% of the biosphere where life can exist is ocean, is water, and helping people understand how they are connected to it. As terrestrial creatures, we often see our world from that terrestrial centric viewpoint, and we need ocean ambassadors like photographers to say, you're living on an ocean planet, you're directly tied to it no matter where you live, and this is the beauty and this is the complexity, and how the giant whales need the tiny krill, and everything is connected, and you too are connected to the ocean. So let's not see things in a silo. And that's about storytelling. So, and we have the ability to do that.
Well, really, really wonderful words. We wouldn't get away with it with our listeners unless we ask you some prosaic underwater photography stuff.
Okay.
It's a really interesting time in underwater photography from an equipment point of view at the moment. Lots of underwater photographers are dealing with the change from SLR cameras into mirrorless cameras. And I was just really curious about, what are the main camera systems that you're shooting at the moment? How are you finding that transition? And I'd just love to hear a little about the gear you're currently using for your own photography.
Yeah, happy to do it. Well, I'm a Nikon photographer, have been my entire career. So I'm still shooting both DSLRs, and I just started really in last year or two to move into mirrorless. I was on a trip recently shooting the Z8. Which I loved, but I have not yet, quite frankly, taken it underwater. I've been shooting it on the surface, kind of getting used to it, still learning the electronic viewfinder and getting comfortable with all of that. But, I think that's the future. I think that's where we need to go. But my underwater kit is still, D850s and even D5s for the noise, better noise and low light and so forth. But I think I'm very close to making that full switch over to mirrorless, and investing in what obviously is going to be the direction going forward. I check out your blogs and what you're talking about, and try to make sense of it all. So that's very helpful and valuable. But yeah, it is an exciting time and confusing time, as you just mentioned, for underwater photography. And whenever we make an investment in a new camera system, then it means new housings and lots of other stuff too. So before we pull that trigger, as it were, we have to be pretty confident that what we're doing is right. But the smaller cameras, better resolution, better availability to shoot in low light conditions. Being able to shoot high-res video and so forth is all really useful. And as we see the results, I mean, there's amazing photography being done out there. There's great stories being told about this ocean planet. And, as I mentioned earlier, it's happening at a very important time.
We're going to show now a short clip of some of the footage. And then after that, it would be great to hear from you about when people can watch the show.
Caches may still offer Brian the opportunity to showcase some of the Gulf's bright spots.
We're getting ready to go diving.
I've been working on this Gulf of Maine project for about 4 years now, and during that time, it's been very frustrating photographically because so many of the subjects that I sort of naturally expected to be there just were not there. Even simple things like invertebrates. And I was desperately hoping to find sea stars, you know, these beautiful, big, somewhat colorful sea stars. But over these last 4 years, I just wasn't seeing it.
After 4 long years, Brian's luck has finally turned.
You know, if I were to try to explain to somebody what the Gulf of Maine is, what it looks like, what it feels like, it would be this. It would be a single frame, a single photo that shows an explosion of life. All of these animals, you know, fish and invertebrates, and kelp in the background, all these things in one place. It's a Garden of Eden. And that hopefully will translate visually so that people understand.
To the naked eye, the scene is dreamy, but not for the muscles attached to the rock. What you can't see is the sea star prying open the mussel shell with its suctioned feet. And that's not the worst part. The sea star then sends its stomach, full of digestive enzymes, out its own mouth to dissolve and eat its meal. When you speed things up, it's a feeding frenzy. Most of the seats at this diner are taken, and the sea stars on the move hunt for another spot.
I've been literally looking for a scene like this for 3 or 4 years since I've been working on this project and haven't found anything close to this. We did see this invasive red algae, which has done so much damage along the coastal kelp forest, and that gives me great concern for caches. But, you know, by the same token, I see that all the pieces are otherwise in place. Caches still remains largely healthy. There are fish, there are invertebrates, there is healthy kelp. I suppose anything can happen, but I'm certainly in the corner of resilience.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Alex. So the series premieres on July 24th on PBS, which is public television in the United States, but it can be watched on the PBS app or on the Nova, N-O-V-A, Nova YouTube channel. Nova is a show on PBS, and this is a special series for Nova. So either of those places for anybody who doesn't have a way to watch it on PBS in the traditional form.
Sure. And we'll make sure we've got some links under this video for people to click on and find their way straight there
Right.
once it's live, because we'll put this out before it's actually available to watch.
Terrific.
I'd just like to say, I'm just going to put us all back on screen again at my end. I'd just like to say it was a real honor to have you on, Brian. I think the words particularly you've spoken today will be treasured by a lot of our community. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing those great stories, but also so much of your own personal experience as well. It was a very inspiring episode.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure and honor to finally speak with you. I hope we all get to do this somewhere else where we can have a brew or a coffee and just chat a little bit more, but it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for doing what you're doing. And yeah, please let me know if you need any materials at all, want anything at all. We're happy to send it. And hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brian.
All right. All right, guys. Thank you. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.